So now it's my very great pleasure to introduce Razine Najie, who is speaking to us from Haifa, but she originally comes from Nazareth. Razine is an educational psychologist who has worked within the Ministry of Health with a range of different schools, from elementary, middle schools to and kindergarten. And she's done a lot of work with teachers and principals, trying to help them with the dilemmas that they are facing. And she will explain more about her work and the limitations she found when she was asked to work with issues like lack of motivation or violence in schools without any attention to the political context. So that's one of the things that Razine will be speaking about, which is how to develop a different model that reflects the situation in Palestine, in this case in 1948 Palestine. Now Razine works partly in private practice, but partly in the clinical service in Haifa University, and works with a wider age range with adults as well as children. So it's a huge pleasure to have you with us, Razine, and to learn more about your work and the dilemmas that you have, the challenges of working as an activist and a professional within the particular context of 1948 Palestine. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Gwen, for the introduction. شكرا كثير كاترينا على المقطع. Thank you very much, Katrina. It was lovely. You know, today I'm going to talk about feeling strange or alienated, and hearing Katrina, what you have played for us makes it feel more at home. So thank you for that. Today I'm going to share with you my experience as a mental health care that worked in the last May crisis. Actually, I am part of a group of Palestinian mental health care activists that we met each other a year ago, and we started learning liberation psychology, learning and trying to understand liberation psychology. And I'm going also to talk a bit about how we changed and how the May crisis also changed our work. I'm going to talk about the dilemmas and conflicts, and thank you and how we felt more empowered. Thank you very much for listening. It's very important to us. I'm going to talk first about what is liberation psychology. Liberation psychology is a psychology that is very much different from the psychology that we know, the classic psychology that talks about the psyche and talks about the individual power, the individual conflict between the id and superego. Liberation psychology is more socially oriented, and it looks at ability of agency of the individual as very much influenced from the status of its status as an oppressed. It says that oppression changes individuals and changes collective. It interferes with the collective ability to build itself as a group, and it also interferes with the ability of oneself to feel more agent in his reality and to change it. One of the main principles of liberation psychology is that we don't look at theory and try to understand people by theory. We look at reality and we try to understand people by their experience and by reality, and we look at reality in a very critical manner. So today I'm going to share a lot of experiences and a lot of conflicts, because this is our way to understand what empowers people, what empowers us, and what makes us better, what makes us more able, more capable. So what happened in last May? I want to start with that. In last May, after what happened in Sheikh Jarrah, you all know, and after what happened in Gaza, people, and when I say people, I talk about 14, 13, 15 years old, that going into the street demonstrating. I saw people in the demonstrations from the age really of 6 until the age of 80. We never saw something like that. And we always talk between us psychologists that we never saw something like that. And when we tried, and when we look at it, it was very astonishing to us. It was strange because, you know, the fourth prime minister of Israel, Golda Meir, she said about us Palestinians in here that the old ones will die and the youngsters will forget. And so we really did not expect this, all that happened in last May. What happened really influenced also schools. Students in school were arrested. Teachers didn't know what to do. Students were saying to teachers, and even when they were writing to them, I'm going to go to the demonstration. And although there's supposed to be an educational psychologist in every school, and there is, and the educational psychologist works by the municipality. The municipality is responsible for him or her. But a lot of schools were calling on us, telling us, please come, please help. And we were, all the time we were asking, but you have someone to help, so what is the problem? And they would say something like, okay, the psychologist in our school showed the solidarity with Gaza, with Ghazi on Facebook. She wrote something, or she did put a black background, and everyone just, and she got into trouble, so she is away for a while, she has to be interrogated. So we want someone to be here. We also asked with the psychologists that are in schools, what are they doing? And what are they doing is that the municipality of education gave a lot of material about personal trauma. And what the psychologists were doing in school is talking about personal trauma and about the need to be in therapy if you are facing so much anxiety. And I think that is partly why schools continue to call and say, we need someone to come. Because when you talk about personal trauma, it's not it. What happened last May wasn't a personal trauma. I don't know if it was just a trauma. I think it was another phase of our life as an oppressed. It's just another phase, very hard, but it's not something that hit us by surprise. And a lot of the schools, when we talked to, we said, what can we do? They said, we want you to come, but we don't want to get in any trouble. Maybe you could take 1 or 2 teachers into a conversation, let them feel better. They feel very anxious. Maybe what they are going to say will be dangerous to the kids. So it was really a total chaos in schools, and especially in the cities that were the Jews and Arab lived together, because also settlers were going into homes, and the kids saw their parents, one kid 4 years old, saw her father dragged out of home in front of her. And when I talked to the mom, she told me, okay, so what can I do in order to help her? And I told her, what do you want to do? She told me, I don't know what I want to do. I want to do so many things. I am afraid of what I want to do. And I think it's another thing. People in here didn't only was afraid of the attack from the outside. They were afraid a bit from the intense of feelings that they were having and what they are going to do about it. And the response of talking about personal trauma wasn't what they needed. What happening was to the collective, was another phase in our life as a group, as Palestinians, not only here, Palestinians that feel connected to Gaza, to Gaza, to the West Bank, to Palestinians abroad. And this was a phase that people needed to feel connected. What happened In Sheikh Jarrah, I think it also very much shows this feeling of deprivation, the deprivation of land that we went through. People were so much angry about what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah because of this deprivation and because they want to say no. Um, so talking about individual trauma wasn't it. And I want to stop and think a bit with you about that. You know, even when I was in school, I always felt like the classical psychology does not answer the needs of my society. It always felt strange. And in Arabic, we have, when we say Western, it means Gharbi. And when we say something that is strange or alienating, غريب. So it's using the same letters, just organizing them differently, gives you two meaning, two words. One is strange and one is West. Because strange is, the West is a bit strange to us from what we hear as a collective group, like, and especially as an oppressed. People needed to feel that they are part of a group, of a collective, and that this collective has power, because the self could not gather itself if it didn't relate to this, to the power of the group. We, as we in the we and my colleagues that worked a lot in this time used to listen to the stories of, we used to go and see, for example, a student that was arrested or someone that went through violence from settlers. And we would talk to them, how are you feeling? What do you think you need now? What kind of help? And we were very much astonished from what they said. One guy that I talked to, he said, and this, I always felt alone. And I always felt that I'm not part of a group. But actually when the settlers came and happened, and after what happened to me, I felt for the first time that I am a part, and that I am part of a group of Palestinians, and that they are with me and that they will stand with me. After that, this kid joined the youth movement in his city, and we continued talking for a couple of times, and he said, I feel very much empowered. Another guy in his age, 22, that also went through the same thing, he told me, no, I want to be treated. So he decided he wants to be treated. And I told him, okay, you want to be treated. I will search, I will see who can start with you. And he said, but I really need him to be a psychologist that is politically involved and that is socially involved. And I told him, why is that important to you? He said, because I need to be understand. I need someone to understand me. And it was critical for him. And he continued saying, I want someone to understand. And I think by saying I want someone to understand, he really meant I want someone similar. The pain is too much, the pain is too big, and I want to be connected to someone similar that understands the pain and that can share this pain. It's not about talking about my personal life, personal dilemmas. It's that me and another one is going through something very powerful, and I need someone similar. Also, when we sat as a group of psychologists and thought what really can help now after the May crisis, what really can help. And people talked about two things. They talked about this group, the group of liberation psychology that we meet once a month, and we discuss, sometimes we discuss articles, sometimes we discuss things that we have been going through. And they said, for us, what is important is that me here, I can talk to another Palestinian that lives in San Francisco and someone that lives in Gaza. And I can feel that I am connected. I can feel that that I am part of a group that share the same memory, the same needs. So I think that one of the things of being connected is very important to us, because it's like, it's not only that the feeling of agency does not get built only by your own experience. It's how you conceive your group. Is it powerful or not? And I think that the feeling of connectedness gives us this feeling that I am part of a group, that share the same pain, this immense pain, and that also can help me. This collective self, this feeling that I am part of this collective and that this collective can do something together and can be better is very important to people. So we saw that this need to connect as something very essential. It's like existing. It's like I can't exist without connecting to other that is similar to me. It's not that it is only alienating, like I feel strange. It's also very essential to the self. Also, we talked about what can we learn from what have happened in last May, and people talked about developing new knowledge. Was very interesting because our first meeting as a group, we talked about the relation between liberation psychology and violence. And the group, that was a meeting that a lot of psychologists were part of, and they all the time they said, okay, now tell us how can we liberate people? Now tell us how can we be liberation psychologists? And I was also very much in that place, and I was telling to my friend Asrar, the one that lectured about this topic, okay, now tell people how can they do that in their room, in the clinic, and how they can do that in the schools. And we didn't know then that liberation is a process. It's not something that you learn. It's the ability to be creative. It's the ability to take chance. It's the ability to decide something and know what are the consequences. I think that making new knowledge is important, because people that used to say, tell us how to be liberated, now say, how can we work together and make new knowledge that is like us, that is similar to us, and that can help others. I think it's, when I looked at it, I think it's part of our reparation as a group. It's like you've been ripped apart, or like your internal world, the internal of the collective was damaged, ripped apart. And this is saying that I can do something, we can do something as a group, and making this new knowledge is like our reparation, we trying to get a sense of agency. Now I want to talk about something a bit different from what I started, and it's more about our experience here, not only as mental health care, but also as people that live with Jews. And I want to relate to that because I think it's very important to the other, to the feeling of agency that I started talking about at first. You know, when we, after the, can you mute that? Thank you. When we were kids, they always say that we are part of this society. And there is this notion that it's like a melting pot. Everyone in here lives together. But we're always the dysfunctional part. We're always the more violent, that has less grades, that raise their kids in a very ancient way that does not respect the child enough. There is always this saying to us that you are less. So it's like telling us that you are like us, but you are less all the time. And when you grow up with this feeling, it's like you're always comparing yourself to the other. You never had the chance to think who you are. Even in our schools, there is the Nakba law. Nakba law says that you cannot talk about Nakba in schools. And that school that decides to talk about Nakba gets deprived from financial aid. So it's even the narrative, we're not allowed to know this narrative. So we're always compared to the more privileged, and we're always, and they are always telling us that we are less. When you grow like that, you never have the chance to know who you are, to who are you connected, what can you do together, and it really influences your feeling of agency. In the last war, I was at another fellow psychologist in his clinic. He's a Jew, and he's a very close friend of mine. And when we started talking, he told me, "What's wrong, Rosine? Your face looks very, you look very tired. What's wrong?" And I told him, "You know what's wrong. And I am tired because of what's happening." And he told me, "What is happening?" He told me, "Yeah, it's because the missiles that were shot from Gaza." I told him, "No, there was Sheikh Jarrah before." And he told me, "Yes, I heard about that." I told him, "Yes, it started before." And then he told me, why are you so sad?" And I told him, "Do you know the feeling of knowing that in my city, Nazareth, where I grew up, a 14 or 15 years old kid are being interrogated very roughly, violently, and they are supposed to be at the peak of their narcissistic, I don't know, feeling like they are in top of the world, and they are being beaten for saying we're against what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, or we're against war on Gaza." There was a room in Nazareth, the room of interrogation. They called it the red room because kids were talking about how they were all the time beaten and they saw only red ground from the blood. I told him, "Do you know what it's like to have another colleague, mental health care, that lives in Gaza, that puts a story on Facebook with him holding his kids and writing, 'I'm waiting to die.'" And a lot of colleagues did that, just putting their pictures, and because of the intensity, writing, "We're waiting to die." And he said, "I didn't know about all that." I told him, "Yes, because they don't tell you what's happening in the other side." So he told me, "I am happy that you made me feel. I need to know this stuff. How can I help?" I told him, "You cannot help." He told me, "Why?" "Of course, there's something that I can do." I told him, "I don't know. What can you do? I don't know what can you do." And I went home. A day after that, he called me and he said, "Rosine, I really feel bad, but thank you for sharing. Tell me, what can I do?" I told him, "I can't tell you what to do. It's something that I tell you. I just told you what's happening in other places. I told you what you need to hear." So he told me, so I told him, "What can you do is something like when someone in the office comes and say that we're very anxious, that the young kids are attacking us. You can say these stories. You can let them know what is happening. So we won't be those monsters. So they understand what is happening also on the other side." For me, in this talk today, it was important also to talk about our relations as mental health care that work with each other, because in liberation psychology, one of Paulo Freire is a Brazilian teacher, philosopher. He said that in oppression, humanity, the sense of humanity get distorted, not only for the oppressed, but also for the oppressor. And he said that if we do not talk to the humanity of the oppressor, then we will just redo what has been done to us. He said we should never let go of this discourse. But when I think about that, it's like when you grow up in a place when you never know who you are. Like you're always in relation to someone else. What Pablo Freire said is very important, but sometimes you need to take 2 steps back to know yourself, just to get connected, to feel as a group what is this, what does this collective does to you? How does it empower you? What do you know about each other? And then you can have this talk. In last May, we did that. We took a step back. We gathered together as a group, and we saw a range of feeling that you don't see in everyday life, and it's very human. And the feeling of hope, the feeling that you can change stuff, even it's very, very hard, and even it means that you will be in conflict. The feeling that we can do and change together. Those are feelings that you don't see in everyday life. In everyday life, you see a lot of fear, a lot of anger, you see violence, and you see depression. So I think this last events also made us feel humanity in its more different colors, something like that. And that's in general what I like to share with you. Gwen?
Yes, I'm just unmuting. Thank you so much. I was incredibly moved by what you spoke about, Rosine. I think the power of being connected and the development of agency between the ways that people share their collective experiences, and how that was brought into such sharp focus, first by Sheikh Jarrah and then by the attacks on Gaza. And I was perhaps wanting to ask you how you think, because you also talked about something that was very powerful, which is about we are made to feel that we are the dysfunctional ones. And I wanted to ask you whether you think it's possible for children in 48 Palestine, children who are subject to the Israeli school system, is it possible for them to develop the kind of ways of thinking that come from liberation psychology, which is understanding the nature of their oppression? I just wondered if you could say a little bit about what you think's possible when, as you say, you can't even share the history of the Nakba in Israeli schools. Would it be possible to say a bit about that?
In the last events, kids were sharing their experiences in school all the time with each other, and they were sharing it from this notion of feeling empowered. They at all don't understand the complexity. Part of them does not understand what is Palestinian and how and what we've been through, like you said. But this connectedness, this me and the other kids, we were demonstrating together, or drawing flags and running in the streets with these flags, Palestinian flags. It made them feel empowered. I think that fear and it becomes to be part of these children very much when parents or teachers hush them. They think that these kids are going to be in danger, or they will put them in danger. I think that if you tell the story, and you should tell the story, you should not be so much afraid, because if not, you know, we're living in a dynamic reality, and there is always war. And there is always, every 2 years, we have a crisis or something happening in here. So when you don't tell the kids, they will fill this void in their own information. And sometimes it's not where you want them to be. So we always talk, you should not put so much on schools, especially because schools are part of the Ministry of Education. You should not put so much on schools. There should be youth movements. There should be education at home to learn who you are, and talk to your kids about what you can do and cannot do as a family, as a unit. What do you accept or not, and what they are the consequences of every decision you make. Because, you know, a lot of kids went to the demonstration, and there when they were interrogated, a lot of kids, and I can very much understand that, 13, 14 kids, sorry about what I'm going to say, but they peed their pants because they were so much afraid. They didn't understand, they didn't know what is expecting them. So part of what we did as psychologists also to explain what is interrogation and what happens there. And there are a lot of materials that a lot of colleagues made and they went through in social media and etc. to understand, if you took this decision, what's going to happen.
Thank you very much. I think Teresa has a question. Would you like to ask your question, Teresa?
Yes, thank you, Rosine. That was very, very interesting. Thank you so much. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about this awful position of being defined as other, always having to be in relation to the oppressor, and how in liberation psychology it's possible to help people define themselves not as in relation to the oppressor, but as individuals who have their own integrity, because I imagine it's really, really hard.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think when you are born, and since you were a little kid, you always are in this relation to the other. It becomes part of you. You never question that. You never question that. It's always part of who you are. You always think in this manner. I am better. I am less. How can I show them that I am good enough or better than they expected? And I think that the main idea is, when people think that way, is to stop and say, are you really in this relation? Are you really in this contest? Do you really have to show that you are good enough for the other side? To question this, because people does not question. It's like this is the nature of oppression. You are born into this system, and this is have been like that for ages, and your parents think this way, and your grandparents think this way. So you never question this idea. It start questioning, is it really? And what happened in last May, I think that the massive attack, a lot of people were very much surprised. They always thought we are living in coexistence. So how come that it's not only that settlers came into the homes, it's about the people that so that it's okay. It really shocked people. I was talking to a teacher that in an after-school daycare for kids, I don't know if that is the correct term, Gwent, it's like afternoon, okay. And this daycare is private, and she was putting pictures and videos from the attacks on the demonstrations. And her employees told her, if you continue doing that, we don't know if you're going to continue working with us, because you're just raising violence. And after that, her employee put on Facebook, settlers come and live here. I don't want to say which city, because I don't want because of the privacy of this teacher. There was in certain city, she said, come settlers and sit here. And this teacher was in shock. She said, I never expected, 2 months ago, I never expected that will happen. So this, I think that what happened in last May shocked people in here. We shocked the idea of coexistence when you work with someone and you see that he can be so much mad at you. And this made them, crises make us question what we always have been thinking as natural and normal. So do I really want to show that I'm good enough for someone that will always look at me as the dysfunctional or as the attacker? This made people think.
Thank you.
Rosine, it sounds as if you're also speaking about what happens when people really understand the way an ideology works, that the whole purpose of Zionist ideology is to other and make Palestinians feel less. And I suppose, you've talked a bit about how these ideas can become internalized if you're not questioning how the ideology works. And I imagine, but you're also saying sometimes that has to happen not in the schools because they're too constrained, but outside, in different groups in the home or in youth groups. I wonder if you could say a bit more about that, because I think that process of, that is a liberation of the soul in a way, isn't it? And I just wonder if you could say a bit more about that.
People outside of schools, like parents that came and tried to talk with us about what happened and what can I say to my 4 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old that ask me. They didn't want to develop an ideology themselves about what's happening. They didn't want to talk about that. So if you're asking me what is happening outside, from my experience, I didn't see that people were scared, and their thoughts, their feelings were in a chaos. They weren't in a situation where they could organize everything and tell a story to their kids. But what was interesting is that I really come again to the point of connectedness. It's when someone came and dragged this father from his house. The neighbors did this rotation thing when every day someone take those kids to his home. And they did a lot of activities in the streets for kids about what is Palestine, what does that mean to be Palestinian. So the answer maybe to what you're saying is that a lot of movements in the neighborhood started to rise. There was also the memory of Nakba, and they did a lot of activities in the streets about that. But when people got attacked, they didn't want to talk about that. They only felt disconnectedness. And then, when I talked to this mom, after that I talked to her, and she was very pleased, and she said that I'm okay, I think the kid is okay. So she didn't develop anything, I think, an ideology, but this feeling of connectedness. And the kid felt that the neighbors is here with us, and they help us, and that the father came back home, and that you're not alone. There are people with you, and they are here with you. It's like it's okay to exist even as a different. It's conflictual. It's very much conflictual, but you have your people. I think that this is part of liberation psychology, is to feel this collective power. You don't have to be someone radical, or you don't have to have this ideology. You just need to, you just need to feel like you have the right to exist, to be connected to this place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think Martin has a question. Would you like to ask your question, Martin?
Hi, Rosine. I think in a way I've got three, and I'm not sure if I'm taking you away from the subject too much. I mean, if it's not the area that you feel competent or interested in describing, then first question is going back to what you were saying about people's awareness of being Palestinian. I get the sense there's a strong awareness of being oppressed and of being kind of regarded as kind of inferior and so on. And at the same time, without a teaching of any history and geography and so on, a lack of consciousness of being Palestinian in the past. I think that's what. Yeah. So I'm interested in how far you think families do carry a history, how far people, elders share a sense of that history, or whether it is being forgotten and eroded, or apparently eroded. Where that's sort of an area I think is of real interest. A couple of perhaps short questions. You referred to the settlers, and are these people who come in from the West Bank into 48 in order to intimidate Palestinian communities in 48? And is that an organized thing? And is it intended to unsettle those communities in terms of their sense of security and so forth as residents of the country? And also we saw film of the state, the army and police ignoring or participating in some of the mob attacks on Palestinians during those events. And I wondered if the relationship between the Palestinian community and the state has changed since then, or whether it's always been, you know, whether this was kind of understood to be the relationship, one of coercion and of intolerance and danger and so on.
I will start with the last question. I think that it changed because although we always had a conflictual relation with the police, we never expected to be ignored when we come asking for help. It was never, and we never expected that. And even the kids that were they were hurt by the settlers, they said, I went to the police, and there was the gas in my eyes, I couldn't see, and they didn't help me. And they told me, go away. I've heard this story from so many. But after that, he said, I went to the gas station, and there were 3 Palestinian girls, and they took me to the hospital, and they came the day before, and they to see that I'm okay, and they asked for me, and then you came, and then, you know, all of this feeling that we are part of a group make people feel more secure. But I can't tell you what shape does our relationship with the police is taking now. It's different from one place to the other, really. From cities, it's very, very different. And also, I don't know if you know about this. 2 weeks ago, there was a document that talked about the relation between the police and the Shabak and violence violence in our society, and how the criminal minds of our society work with the Shabak, and this is why they work together. This is why the city they cannot really. The police said it was a document that the police got out and said the criminal minds work, or the mafia of the Arab society works with the Shabak, and this is why we cannot get involved in this relation. And it was, how can you say something like that? It's like there is something after this crisis that was just masks off, something like that, and we're masks off. It's like the mask is off, and we're understanding what's happening. We don't have a shape of this relation yet, but it's unpleasant and it makes people anxious. But the feeling of to get together sometimes help. The question is, and I ask myself, how much can we? And I really hope that we can continue with this group connectedness and group help. It needs to be organized, and it needs to continue in order to continue feel empowered and not to feel it's another a movement that came out of the crisis and then went alone, and to continue feeling this feeling of lack of agency, and my group cannot help me, and we cannot do something that will succeed for a while. This is something that we think of. You asked about the settlers. I think you saw the videos. We don't know really what happened there, but we know that settlers came in here and they were trying to make us afraid. I don't think that people got afraid, but I think that people got hurt. The first question, remind me, Martin, it's about, remind me, please.
I was kind of asking about the extent of a consciousness of a kind of a shared consciousness of the history being passed down informally, or whether people are really losing a sense of, or whether you, I think in a way you were surprised, you conveyed some surprise that the younger people had become so active, as if they perhaps were unaware of who they were and of the history. So I'm just kind of interested in digging a bit deeper about that. You know, what is the outlook and consciousness of people who've been raised within this education system, but also treated as second-class citizens, you know, in the way you described?
I think that the situation here has differed very much in the last 10 years, I want to say. I don't want to say more. I think that it has been different for 20 years now, but the last 10 years were very much, it's like we were the Palestinians in here, we were the focus of everything. Like if you want people to not think about anything else, tell them the Palestinians in here are the threat. So in the last 10 years, it's not like with the other prime ministers. So people shared more the story and the narrative. The Nakba law is, I think, 7 years old or 6 years old. So there were a lot of laws that are against us in the last years. So the situation wasn't like that always. I knew that people knew the story and people talked about it. But last couple of years, a lot of social movements, a lot of NGOs that worked in here, their working has differed because people were very much afraid, because there was so many laws that they constrained people, and people were political activists, people were really chased, and people were more afraid. I think that we were surprised because even with all this fear, people went to the streets. It's not because they don't know the story. It's because how did you overcome that fear? But I really think that what happened in Sheikh Jarrah, what is still happening in Sheikh Jarrah, it's reminded us of our deprivation here from the land. It's like we cannot let go of Jerusalem. It's Jerusalem, yeah. We cannot let go of that. I think that here the relationship was always stable, but when coming to Jerusalem and when bringing settlers and attacking us this way, it's like the situation became you can't stand it anymore, something like that. People could not stand it anymore. And this is why we saw what happened.
Yeah, I wondered, Rosine, just following up on the question, two things really. One is that what happened in Sheikh Jarrah and the settlers coming into 48 Palestine brought history right into the present. The dispossession was there, and I think in the international community, that's been one of the things that has led people to be much more politically aware because they see it happening. And I suppose the other thing I wondered was what you think the effect of the nation-state law in its much more overt discrimination. It's always been discriminatory, but this was much more overt. I wonder, do you think that had an impact on how Palestinians living in 48, their level of political awareness?
I didn't understand the question much. Can you? I didn't.
Sorry.
Can you?
I just wonder whether you think that the nation-state law of, I think it was 2018, which stated that the state is only for the Jewish people, whether you think that, Chris, that had some impact on making it so obvious that this is an apartheid state.
Okay. This law made it so obvious that we are not part. And if you want to be, we're like they used to say, souk bet. It's like we are the less here, and we have to settle for that. I think so many laws and people living in here. It's like every day you put on the news in the morning and you hear something that provokes people against you. It's like all the time telling people that you are the bad and that everything wrong. It's like you are there's this theory, I don't know if I'm telling this right, but it's like you have the keys to hell. It's like you are the identified patient. You are the someone that is everything wrong is just put on you. And I think having to suffer all that and saying, okay, the situation will come better, because 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we had hope something different. I remember that I was a kid when we talked about peace. It was different, and all of this changes. Even for me, I feel like it's immense, and it's too fast. So people didn't really realize that but I think all of these laws were part of, and what happened made it, we cannot shut up anymore. We have to do something. Yeah.
Take the masks off with your expression. I think that's the way you described it, which is very powerful. Brooke, I think, has got a question. Brooke, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, hello, hello, Rosine. I was very, very interested in your presentation and very touched by it. I'd have all kinds of things to say about it, but just limit myself to this one question, since you emphasized the importance of feeling connected and of collective action. Here in France and in the US and around the globe, you know, where we hear about walking and the Black Lives Matter and feminist movement, et cetera, oppressed groups that try to get together around a shared identity and or history, they come under attack from apparently well-meaning defenders of, quote, universalism and human rights. And they're accused of being clannish, of only wanting to talk to people like themselves, of excluding people who think otherwise, who have other identities and histories, and even of, in a sort of a mirror fashion, of fostering hate in their turn. So I wonder if you encounter those objections, so where you live and work, and how do you go about confronting their arguments?
Okay. I will answer, Brooke, and tell me if I understood you right, okay?
Mm-hmm.
When we start talking about liberation psychology, a lot of psychologists that believe in classic psychology told us that we're bringing something. First of all, one of the things that they say to us, but we never learned that. We told them, okay, you never learned that, but it's something that could talk to us. It's like the political and social events influence the self. It's something that you can relate to. They said, okay, and then who is liberated and who is not liberated, and who decides that? And I have a lot of colleagues that I tell them, come join us, come listen to us, and maybe you feel like you're part of. And they say, this is very much like you say, it's like deciding who is liberating and who is not. And I always answer that liberation psychology says that as a group, we can connect to the good in ourselves. We are good enough, and we can connect to this goodness and do something together. It's not supposed to be something that put people aside or divide people. At the contrary, it says that everyone here can contribute, and we only need to work with each other. So if someone uses this to say you are liberated and you are not, it's like he uses also a classic theory for his own interests of dividing. But the theory itself says that we are all collective, and we are all we can help each other, each one of his experience, each one of his ability. But we had good in us, and we can make good to our community, to our group. Did I understand your question right, or did I?
Yes, certainly. I was just wondering, good for you if you're able to get that message through, because sometimes we have a hard time, at least I have a hard time, making people understand that sometimes, for instance, whether it's a group of Palestinians, or whether it's a group of oppressed Black individuals, or whether it's a group of women who have been in a particularly oppressive situation, that sometimes people have to get together with people who have experienced like things before they can go and enter into dialogue with people who are unlike themselves. And I'm all for what you apparently seem to be able to communicate to them, and I salute your apparent capacity to deal with this problem. And yes, you did answer my question. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
I think that we get attacked all the time. It's like when we work with each other, we even get attacked. Okay, and for me, it helps that I have colleagues that think like me, and we can talk with each other. And also, it is a process. It is a process, and it's very you feel fear. You feel fear to go into these places because you don't know what you're going to find. I think sometimes people don't want to go to these places because they are afraid to leave what they know and to start thinking differently. But you have to be patient, and some people will get connected to this idea, some people not. We've been working not only on this project, we've been working for so long on this, 4 or 5 years before this project. And it's like when we talk about violence in our community, and we say violence is also connected to the oppression and to the situation as oppressed. People come and say, no, you're just mixing things up. But we have been trying so many plans and so many theories, and it didn't work. Maybe it's part of it. People that don't believe in it, you can continue doing what they do. People that believe in it can think together and try to make up a new knowledge, but it takes a lot of time and patience, sometimes to ignore. And I'm working with someone, we feel this is good. If you feel something else is good, you do your thing, we do our thing.
I think there are quite a few more questions, Razine, but could I just follow up on that? I was wondering what you feel the effect on you as professionals, mental health professionals. What's been the effect of the Palestine Global Network? What has it helped you develop between you? What have been the strengths of it for your group? It sounds as if it's been really powerful.
It is. I think that when you start looking at things, when you put these glasses, okay, on looking at things in the manner of how the political influences the individual, and this is what the global Palestine mental health enabled, and it put on the table. It said this is here and it influences everything. I think it normalized it, and it made it okay to talk about it. It made it legitimate. For me, enabling us to do the liberation psychology group and thinking together like that, having experienced all of that, is very powerful. It also makes you feel sometimes strange from your environment, and how can you bring all this here? But I think that it's a process and that we have to figure out. But when I talked about the similar, it's also finding someone similar that thinks that the political and the social do really affect the individual mental health. I talk to colleagues all over, and even the statements that mental global health Palestine put against war, against war crime, it makes people empowered. They say just the statement, just putting that made us feel empowered, because we do feel that it affects mental health. We do feel that it affects life of kids and teachers, children, everyone. So I think it's very, very important to continue in this work. And it's very important to the people that working in it. I know how much they put an effort to continue pushing this.
Thank you. Katrina, did you have a question? Would you like to unmute and ask your question? Thank you.
It's not actually a question. It's I saw Martin's question on the chat, and he asked if the relationship between Palestinians in different parts of Palestine has been changed by the events since May. And honestly, I felt that we felt much more of what Rosine said as the connectedness. we started feeling much more connected to each other because there was as if like this switch that happened in our heads, like what Rosine says about like taking the masks off. That was a very powerful and very true statement because um, I can say for myself that yes, when I was younger, there was a little bit of hope for like coexistence and all of that, but since May, as if it was all erased, and all we all wanted to do was just stand hand in hand with each other and try to empower whoever does not feel empowered, or the other way around. And yeah, I feel it basically strengthened our connections, whether it was West Bank or 48 Palestine, wherever you want to call it. We all just stood much stronger with each other, and it helped us actually see our reality more. If I hope, Martin, that answered your question.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that, Rosine? Thank you very much, Katrina. That was very powerful.
I'm, yeah, I think that what she said is, and I really believe in it. This connectedness did something to us. But when I talked about the masks off, I really meant about the police. We've been, and about all of this. We're trying, but you know, the claim was always, we're trying to put an end to the crime, but people do not cooperate with us. And now saying, okay, it's not like people is not cooperating. There is someone that is involved in here. So this is what I meant by putting masks off. But I think that people in here are privileged. I think that Jews are privileged, and this is why they sometimes don't feel like they need to know, or it's like it's to face the pain that my group did something that I may not want to be part of. I can understand what it's like to be privileged. I didn't choose to be unprivileged, but I am like that. And this connectedness makes it feel the heavy. It's like it's not I bear this. Yani I put this on. It's like this heaviness is everyone has a part in it. Everyone has a little part. It makes it more easy and the more tolerable. That's it.
You mentioned the conversation with your Jewish colleague, and it reminded me of conversations between Black people and white people in Britain, when white people ask their Black colleagues, what should we do? And that's a question that uses privilege in and of itself, because it's not appropriate. As you say, it's not your responsibility to tell your Jewish colleague what he should do. He has to work that out for himself. And I suppose I wondered whether you think there have been any changes in the consciousness of Jewish colleagues or Jewish friends that make you feel more hopeful, or any comments you want to make about that? Anything that makes you think now they are understanding, they're developing some awareness of this situation that they didn't have before?
I think that it is very, very much complicated. And when I talk to people, it's like how much pain and guilt can you take in? This is what decides whether I want to hear or not. Because when we talk about the painful realities. I don't know. I asked a couple of my friends that work with Jews in offices and asked them, so has anything changed? And they said, we don't talk about it. And talking about it, it's like, what did this crisis made me feel? It's not about what happened here and there. It's about what made me feel, and we just close that, and it's in the meeting where everyone sits, and we don't discuss that in private when we sit with each other. I think that the last events were very powerful to everyone. And I think that a lot of people, Jews and Arabs, want to forget about it and to move on, like it never existed. And I think we're still in that phase, but I'm sure it will influence the relation in the future. Some people feel more liberated to talk about that, some people less also.
Thank you. Sondos has, sorry, did you want to add something then?
I said Sundus wanted to ask
Yes,
something.
Sondos, yes. Would you like to ask your question, Sondos?
Yeah, I thank you so much for your really inspiring talk. And I studied psychology for a bit, but I it didn't agree with me. But I am from Palestine and I am from the Gaza Strip, and I'm asking this question from like kids who have suffered from PTSD and are a bit skeptical, grown up to be skeptical about the whole liberation idea. So yeah, I want you to comment on how would you react to them, to say to them, kids who have been traumatized.
Are you talking particularly about kids in Gaza, Sondos?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Do you have some ideas about that, Razine?
To be totally honest, I don't know. Whenever I think about what is going through in Gaza, I find myself overwhelmed, to tell you the truth. And I don't know what can you say. And I'm too young to go to Gaza, but they don't allow me to go there. But my friends that went there, when they come back, I have a friend that they have been silent for a week. He don't want to talk, and I don't know what he has been going through. But what the Dr. Yasser said, the article that he wrote, and a lot of mental health workers, what they describe about what is happening, I don't know much about it, but I do know about the psychologists that did researches on what is happening on Gaza. And there's the doctor, I will tell you his name and send you even the Amjad, Dr. Amjad, and I can send you also the articles. He speaks about post-trauma in Gaza and in here. And he said that in the first 6 months, you can see a lot of signs of post-trauma. But after that, because of the connectedness in Gaza, after that, after a year and a half, you see how the kids show much less, I think 7% or something like that. I can send you the articles, but the post-trauma signs than kids in here and people in here, because this connectedness, and we know who we are, what we are dealing with, facing with, everything is clear, makes people feel more, make people heal or feel better. But in here, it's different. I don't know about the last war. This, I really don't know, because Dr. Yasser talks about the harshness of this war. Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, we did have Ibrahim here, but who is from Gaza, and he might have wanted to say something, but I think he might have left. I can't see him. Are you still here, Ibrahim? I think he's probably not. We have David. David, are you here? I wondered if you wanted to comment. David works with the team in Gaza. I wondered if you would like to say something about that.
Thank you, Gwyn. And thank you, Rosine, for your talk. I really, really appreciated that. And I have lots of questions, I'm afraid. About Gaza, something, Rosine, you said, which really struck home with me from what I know of what goes on in Gaza, is the sense of connectedness between families or groups in local areas. This sense that they do get together once awful traumatic event has occurred. Now, there's a very important image that came out of Gaza immediately after the 11 days of bombing in May. And that is of people going out into the streets and sweeping the cement dust off. They all got together. When I say all, you're basically feeling you're part of a collective, getting together and doing something. Now, there's a lot of that happening in pockets inside Gaza that is having some effect on alleviating PTSD symptoms in the way that you mentioned over a period of about 6 months. And I just, can I move on, please, to a question, actually, relating to your talk, because I'm very interested in your liberation psychology idea, which must derive from something in Paulo Freire's work, I imagine, and I would like to hear more about that. And I've always wondered whether we can introduce something like that into our work in Gaza, particularly, and this is where it gets difficult, this idea that you are going to develop what Freire called a critical consciousness. Now, this is actually quite difficult in a school situation, and may I say, in schools in the UK, never mind where you are, because there is a kind of push to go back to what Freire himself called a banking method of education, where the knowledge was sort of plonked into you and that was it. Whereas what critical consciousness is all about, and it seems to me what you've been talking about, is actually getting your brain activated so that you engage, therefore through engagement, empower yourself. And I just wonder, do you introduce his ideas into your liberation psychology sessions? And do you find it easy to do so?
Thank you very, very, very much for the question. I work with teachers in schools, and sometimes, like what Gwen said at first, when they come to me and ask about kids' motivation, okay, and why are they not motivated to learn? And then I talk about Paulo Freire and the banking method, and about being human, curious, about letting the child being himself, being curious, being want to connect with other kids and think together, living all of the emotions that he should feel as a kid. And when I talk to teachers, they all learned this method. They all learned about Paulo Freire. They learned it maximum 1 or 2 lectures, okay, maximum. And they know the name, they have heard it, but they never meant what the implication is on kids on school. They never understood what banking method do to the humanity of a person, to his ability to feel like he can be agent in his society, or that he can have the ability to decide for himself and be capable to manage the consequences. They never understood that in this manner. So when we talk about it, and when I connect this to motivation, teachers feel like enthusiastic very much about this idea. But I ask myself always, can they really continue with that? Because when you're always in a relation, I am a teacher, and I am always in a relation with the more powerful, and I want kids to have good grades. So they say that our school is the best and it's better than. So when when teachers cannot feel, enjoy being a teacher, being a tutor to someone, enjoy this relation, how can they make someone connect to these feelings of curiosity and motivation when he is feeling so all the time that he is that he is examined for what grades does he give? So this is part of it. In our talkings, We have talked about Paulo Freire, but we never studied it enough, and I think we will. We have an idea of working with school outside of the Ministry of Education, having work with the teachers about what is the teaching of Paulo Freire. What does banking do to feeling of human, which is what always Paulo Freire talks about. This is an idea in progress. We hope, but it's very difficult to enter schools. The Ministry of Education is wrapping itself up around it, especially elementary schools. So we will see.
Thank you. We have a couple of other questions. We have one from Marie and one from Martin. Is Marie still here? Yes, Marie's here. Would you like to ask your question, Marie? Marie Saba, I think you had a question.
I'm sorry. Hi.
Okay. Hi.
Yeah, my question, thank you, Rosine. My question was about these political changes. If you feel any hope, is possible with these changes, Netanyahu is out, and I don't know. That was my question.
Hope for what, Marie? Hope for what?
Any change in the government you feel it's going to be the same as with Netanyahu, for hope for recognition. Let me explain. When I hear all these changes, I don't see any difference. That's that's why I worry. So maybe from there you can see, maybe Lapid, who is the strong one here, I think. I don't see it, so that's why I was asking.
Okay. I think the feeling of hope that I'm talking about is from people, like I said here, feeling that they can help each other and they don't ask for help from the outside all the time. We feel like we can help each other. Maybe we don't know how yet, but we are ready to listen to each other, to be there for each other. It gives me much hope. Concerning the political status, I really don't know, it's very new, but we hear less racist stuff, to be honest, and it's less stressing. When Netanyahu were here every day, in the morning, in the evening, there was something about us. It was very stressful. And I'm talking about myself, okay? I don't know what my colleagues will think, but there is something less stressful in that you are not always the identified patient, the someone that whatever wrong in this city, you're always the one to blame, really, every day. So that is a bit different, but I don't know further than that. I don't know if really the policy changed. We have to see for that.
Thank you very much. We have two more questions, one from Martin and a comment or a reflection from Umesh. So would you like to go first? Your question was first, Martin, and then Umesh.
Thank you.
And there's a noise of typing coming from somewhere. And I thought it was Sondos who hadn't muted, but in fact she has muted, but I can still hear it. So if anybody is typing and not muted, could you just mute? Thank you. Martin.
Thank you, Gwen. I was thinking how the Black Lives Matter, the impact of Black Lives Matter has been quite powerful on the mental health world in the West. The Black Lives Matter movements in the USA and in the UK have both expressed their solidarity and support for Palestinian liberation and for BDS and so on. And this has caused something of a panic here. So organizations here, both at political level, but also at a sort of mental health level, have been trying to separate the two and say, yes, we can look at, we want to deal with racism, we want to, look at all this, but we mustn't talk about Palestine. So and that's part of the background. But listening to you, I was very struck by obviously the sort of parallels and connections with the analysis of the experience of Black communities within Britain, for example. And I was wondering if the Palestine Global Network or other groups of professionals have contact with Black mental health organisations or with mental health organisations in the Global South, whether there's been a sort of linking up on these issues.
I know that Nadira Kevorkian, you know her from our group, is very much interested in that, and she talks about how much we can learn from each other. We did not get to that, but I know that it's something that they are planning on. I know that's something that is Nadira interested in, at least on bringing to our liberation psychology meetings, learning more. But especially, we talked about it maybe 2 months ago, that people now are really interested on talking about each other, about us. So we're putting this at the side for a while, but we will reach that too.
It's perhaps somewhere where we might be able to act as go-between in a way with some organisations in the UK. Maybe. I mean, it's only a possibility, but I think it might be quite interesting to, and useful here for them to for them to hear about your experience actually. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think Umesh, if you're still here, has got a question. Would you like to ask your question? I'm just looking to see if Umesh is still here.
Hi, yes, I am. Thank you very much for a very moving presentation and sharing of your lived experience, Rosine and colleagues. And I think the idea that you and Martin were just talking about the liberation psychology and some of the possibilities of solidarity of the oppressed working together to support the Palestinian movement, and I'm South African and involved here in psychology. So I think from what you were saying, there are ways in which we can draw on some of the liberation psychology, the theology of liberation that Brooke just mentioned, and use that as a way of thinking about psychology for the psychology of oppression and liberation. And there's some really nice work that's been done here, done by Hussein Bulhan in Somaliland, in Africa, and perhaps this is something that we could, in the way that Martin's been talking about, think about sort of working together to share the information that we have. You spoke about Nadira Kevorkian, and Nadira has been involved with us in South Africa. And I mean, just historically, Ahmed Bakar, who was from Birzeit University, and was also in the head of the International Society of Traumatic Stress. He and Nadira came to South Africa in 1990s when we were also organizing to have a democratic psychology association before 1994, when we had our own, were able to have our freedom and our democratic one person, one vote. And so I think, across the regions, and there's also a really nice group called the Pan-African Psychology Union. And Rosine, if you have an email, just drop it, and we'd be able to get you connected to the Psychology Society that is working very strongly in the way that you are talking about, and find ways that we can connect together to be able to support the work that is being done, so that there's a braided and focused. There's a braided approach to the liberation right across all oppressed communities, whether it be in the US with a very strong solidarity with the BLM movement, or the Black Consciousness movement in South Africa, or with Palestine.
Thank you very, very much. I will put my email.
Just perhaps to add to the voices from Gaza, in terms of, I think the issue that was spoken about was, well, there were several, but one was the issue of feelings of connectedness, and how people in Gaza are feeling, or whether they're feeling, the level of connectedness that Rosine was speaking about in other parts of Palestine. I just wondered if you'd like to add something to that, Ibrahim.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Ibrahim. I'm working in PTC UK in Gaza. Actually, after the escalation in Gaza, after what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, I felt that our country is more connected now. People are more connected. Each day we are following news, what's happening in Jerusalem, what's happening in 48 cities. Also, when I saw the timeline for my friends on Jerusalem, they are talking about Gaza, people here in Gaza talking about what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah. What happened in May linked our country more strongly. People are more connected, especially when we are talking about the community, we are talking about the individual. Also, if we are talking about the association, they are more connected right now. If we compare before May, things are more strong and beautiful right now.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Is there anything you'd like to say in response, Rosine?
Like I said, Ibrahim, when people go to Gaza, they come back very overwhelmed, and to hear that you feel like you are empowered, it's very important. We feel like we are apart, but yet we are together, but yet apart. So thank you for that.
We're coming towards the end of our time. I wonder whether there are any other questions or comments, or we will be finishing up, but maybe just give people a chance to ask anything or say anything spontaneously as they might like to. I think David looks as if he's about to, from his body language.
Could I be spontaneous just for a moment?
Give it a go.
To reinforce what Ibrahim has been saying, there is before and after May. After May, things were changing. And obviously from what Ibrahim has been saying, the sense of connectedness amongst Palestinian people in all the different communities there has changed. And I've noticed it in the UK with Muslim organizations contacting us at PTC UK, wanting to do something. There seems to be a different dynamic now. And I don't quite know how we can take advantage of it, but it's there. That's all I really want to say. Maybe the equal and opposite thing that is happening is increased targeting of the charitable groups and people who want to help the Palestinians. Maybe the two have to go together.
Yes, I think the degree to which the backlash against all this enormous change in consciousness is I mean, it's in a way it's terrible, but it is also a sign of the power of the collective and the determination of the liberation movement in whatever form it is. So I guess we can see it both ways, but it's very terrifying when it happens. Just recently, I'm sure everybody knows, the offices of DCI International Palestine were raided, and all their computers and all their documents relating to child prisoners were removed. And those are the kinds of vicious attacks on the people who are trying to support Palestinian children and others. So I think we're probably coming to an end. And from my point of view, Rosine, I found this enormously powerful and moving and educational, because I think you've been so good at linking up so many different levels, both of the things that you've said about the limitations of Western psychology, or strange psychology is another way of putting it, which I like. The limitations of that, the importance of developing new ways of thinking that are much more based on people's lived experience and consciousness of their social and political worlds. And you've given many powerful examples of how that works in practice. And I think all of us have probably been making links again to our own engagement with activism, with the pro-Palestinian movement, and how we can be more effective in the way we communicate and think. And your talk has really helped in that endeavour. So I just want to express my profound appreciation to you, Rosine, on behalf of everybody here. And maybe we can all show that appreciation by unmuting and a round of applause.